Now, where did I put it? Here it is. Welcome to the Toolbox. Tools for life and everything in between. Stuff you can use or toss, it's up to you. Hey everybody, my name's Burles, as you all know. This is episode 14 of Tools for the Toolbox, and I have a very special guest today, and I'm really excited. But as usual, I'm going to let him introduce himself. So, who are you, and what is your military background?
Thanks for having me on the show, Chance. I appreciate this.
My pleasure.
Scott Casey. I served with the Canadian Armed Forces back in the 80s and 90s, so I'm vintage, as I like to call it now.
Old school.
Yeah, old school. You know, back when we had the best thing we had was a 21-year-old rifle and a 19-year-old soldier.
Yep.
So, I served in Canada, over in Europe, and I was on Roto Zero in the former Yugoslavia, one of the first 12 Canadians in country there. Wrote a book called Ghost Keepers about the tour and then homecoming and just coming to terms with how things, transpired in my life.
Yeah.
I'm now the past president of Military Mines. I just stepped down November 10th, and Stu Jackson has taken over at the helm there. It's a great organization that I know he's going to do well with. Founder of the Rolling Barrage Cross Canada motorcycle rally for combat vets and first responders, which will be seeing its 5th year come August 2021. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a wicked trip. I really wish I could be on there, but first I got to get a bike, and I got to learn how to ride it, and then I got to make the trip. So I'll join you eventually once I get there.
It's all good. Show up on horseback.
Hey, that'd be good. I don't know if I'd be able to keep up with y'all, but I might have to stop and feed the horse every once in a while.
Yeah, there you go.
Might take a little bit longer to get across the country, but what do you do now other than advocacy?
I'm a heavy equipment operator at a copper mine here in British Columbia.
And you sent me some pictures a little while ago. You're rolling in the massive? I don't even know what it's called. It's a excavator, right? But it's one of the really giant ones.
Yeah, it's an electric shovel. Yeah,
an electric shovel.
That's what they call it. Yeah. If only we had those in the infantry or the engineers, eh?
Yeah. That would. Oh man, I can't. You know what? They would make it so hard for us to take apart, though, and that's how we would have to do it, right? Like they'd have to make it so it was disassembled completely, and then we'd have to assemble it somewhere, and then they'd make us take it down right away. That's the way it works. Yeah. How long you been doing mining or heavy equipment? I should say 11 years.
Yeah.
Oh man,
11 years. Yeah. And prior to that, I was 18 years on the highway driving truck. So I've been out of the forces for quite a few years, since '94.
Okay. How was your transition when you came out initially?
Transition was terrible, to be honest. I was on the 30-day release program at the time when they were doing force reduction.
Right.
And I had spent some time at National Defense Medical Center following my tour, and got the golden handshake there of you're not doing so shit hot, Mr. Casey. And so anyhow, I was given the opportunity to release. So 30 days I was gone, and there was no planning, no preparation whatsoever. It was just get me the hell out of here. And I got out to British Columbia here from Petawawa, and my life just spiraled out of control.
Yeah, no doubt.
It was crazy. I had somewhat of a job to go to, driving truck, but it was very limited. I had to get my license here in BC, and so my dad gave me an opportunity to drive his truck and sit in the jump seat most of the day and watch what he did and pick up all the bits and pieces that I needed to learn to operate a tractor trailer. And so anyway, it worked out for the best. And but I mean the transition from being in the military to being a civilian in 30 days, it's not advisable.
No, that's a rough way to go, especially and moving across the country, right? You're leaving your team, you're leaving your brothers, you're leaving everything behind. I mean, the one benefit you had family there, right? Like you're saying your dad was there.
Yeah.
You know, one of the key things that I always tell people is when you're getting out, make sure you have people around you that can at least help you out, because there's going to be days where you're going to need help. So, I mean, a benefit that your family was there, but you're moving right across the country. Like, there's no one really from your unit. There's no one really from your your battalion. Just you by yourself in the middle of transition.
I was on my own.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah.
Especially after Roto Zero. That's a rough one. So I asked everybody this, but if you had one piece of advice, one thing, right? There's always the one thing for transitioning out. What would your one piece of advice be?
One piece of advice transitioning out would be to make sure that you have something to go to that is stable and something that you want to do. Like, don't just take a job so you can get the hell out. Make sure that you've done your homework, and you've got something stable there, and that makes a big difference. It was interesting when I first got out and I came back to BC, my first job, because I had to do something to generate revenue. I was a single dad at the time, and I had to pay, had to pay for my kid to live and so on. She was just a baby at the time. I think she was 3. And so I got a job at a corrugated box plant, and it was a good job. It was $21 an hour starting wage to push a broom back in '94. So I mean, it was good wages, union job. But I couldn't. Coming out of the infantry and just on the heels of coming out of Bosnia, I was wound up, and there was no way I could do the whole cardboard in, cardboard out, cardboard in, cardboard out, stack, 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 cardboard in, cardboard. It was
8 hours a day. Oh God.
It killed me. I lasted 2 weeks.
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
That's when I got into the cab of a truck, because I knew I could be moving around. Everything was different. Had to pay attention. There was a solitude of that as well. So advice is to make sure you've got something solid to go to, and be confident in yourself that you're going to make it. Because there's, when I left, there was senior NCOs who were very toxic, and they basically said, "You'll be back. You're a loser. You'll be back, just like the rest of them." And that stuff plagues you for a long time.
Yep.
So
even myself now, I got told the same thing. Not by toxic guys, by like friends of mine who had gotten out and then just couldn't handle being out of the military and then got back in, and they're like, "Yeah, no, it's not easy to be out. You'll find that you'll long for it. You'll wish that you could be back here with us, and you'll probably be back. Don't worry. You know your job well enough, and you're good at it. You'll be back." And I was like, "No, not going to happen." But there are times. He was right. There are definitely times where you wish you were still in, and you see a picture of somebody doing something awesome like air mobile inserts or live fire, house clearance, and all kinds of really crazy cool stuff. But you have to think about what you had to do to get there, right? Like, you don't just get to jump on a helicopter and go flying around doing the cool stuff. You have to go through a shit ton of BS just to get there first, and then fuck around with your chain of command it's a shit show. So normally whenever I get those feelings and I start thinking like, oh, I kind of wish I was still in the military, I'll call my buddy back and be like, "Hey man, what are you up to right now?" And he'll be like, "I'm in some fucking training exercise in Wainwright, or I'm out in Petawawa or Gagetown or whatever." And I'm just like, "Cool man, thanks. That's all I needed." But you're absolutely right. Having a plan, having a direction, at least, even at the very least, having a direction of what you want to get into, especially like now with all the schooling and the money that's available for post-secondary stuff once you're out, or re-engaging into society. I tell people to get out. I'm like, man, utilize that across the board. Like, doesn't matter if you don't want to go to school, use it. It's there. Find something to learn while you're out, while you're trying to figure it out, because they're going to pay you while you're in school. So that gives you some time. I mean, back in '94, I was in junior high school, but I remember I was in Calgary at the time, and I remember watching the base, going from like driving past it to seeing guys on parade and people moving around, and seeing that pretty often. And then I saw them move all the stuff in the 90s up to Edmonton, and there were less and less people every time. And then eventually the base was gone and moved up to Edmonton, and I think it was 91, but you could see all the people getting out continually if you were looking for it, because people were just disappearing, and the base wasn't as full anymore. And then, and I know a lot of guys that got out at that point in time, they had no idea what they were going to do. And so a lot of the trades filled up, because that's what I was looking at going when I was getting into high school in the late 90s. I was like, I'd love to get into the RAP program, the registered apprenticeship program, right? And they were like, yeah, it's full. It's totally full. Grade 10, 11, 12 there was a couple openings in welding when I first when I was about to graduate high school in 2000. But they were like, yeah, it's full of military guys who got out because of the drawdown throughout the 90s, and then trade school was the easiest thing to get into. So that's where they went. Mm-hmm. It's a tough thing to watch. I really didn't understand it at the time, and now that I've been through the military and I'm out now, I start to recognize that a lot more. And you do a lot of work, or you have done a lot of work both sides of the border too. Do you see this similar thing in the States, or is it more specific to our side where we just kind of shuffled our dudes off into a corner?
Yeah, there's lots of that sort of stuff happening in the U.S. as well, especially with the reserve units, National Guard, and so on. Lots of them were mobilized and ramped up for the war, and of course now that's you see the decline there, where people are coming back or have come back, and then they've deactivated some of the units, and some of them have just downgraded to their their threat levels. So we're seeing that kind of stuff down there too. Yeah. But it's something that we've told through our advocacy work with military minds, that is, always look for the resiliency. Yeah. And as tough as it might be, that's just even thinking that word on a daily basis helps a lot of the guys just get through the day. And you'll find that after you've gone through a few days, everything just seems to, you snowball, right? The good gets better, and it can be played either way, So yeah, like that transition time was very tragic for me. And I've now dealing with Veterans Affairs Canada. I've been given the opportunity to do vocational rehab and the income replacement benefit and all these new things that are out there. And and the levels aren't very high for me because I'm already healed, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of a piss off for me. It's like, where the hell were you guys 25 years ago when I needed you? And now it's like, you're doing okay. You don't need any help. So it's, there should be like a pain and suffering part of that section for my life, and not just me, but, we've lost 15 guys from my tour just on the English, the Anglophone side, the Francophone side, the Van Deus, they've lost quite a few as well. And, it's all those guys from those days, that era, they suffered horribly, and there was nobody to rely on, for any kind of help. So moving forward, and I've lived that life. I understand it. And now I can talk to other vets, and it's like, hey, you know what? You just gotta take your time and formulate a plan like anything. It's just a new battle plan that you apply to civilian life. So you can do it.
Absolutely. I a friend of mine who's a former Pickley. He's been really advocating for the Mephiquin sufferers and people, and one of the things he came up was a deliverance of, he calls it sanctuary trauma, where you think you're going to get help from something and then get thrown to the wolves. So they were basically, and I mean they still do this, the VA will add trauma to something that's already traumatized, right? You got guys who are getting out who are not well, and then they just throw them to the wolves, or they bury them under paperwork, or they, that's one of the hardest parts, is being able to show up every day and be like, okay, what do I got to do today? And I've told people this too, is like, think of it like training. when you were going through basic, or when you're going through your DP1 or your QL3 or whatever it's called now. It was day to day. You weren't thinking about when the course was over, right? You're not thinking 3 months down the road, like, oh, I got to get through all this shit before I can finish. It's, my back really hurts. Can I make it through this afternoon?
Yeah.
Just, I need to make it to dinner, and then I can take my ruck off. I need to make it to whatever, and I can. And I've told people that, it comes down to the day sometimes where you have to, you got to fight through the day, and you just like, I just need to make it to dinner time, like, and then I can put my email away, I can put the paperwork away or whatever. I just make it to dinner time. Once you're at dinner time, okay, make it to bedtime. Okay, once you're at bedtime, see how you feel in the morning. When and just, you break it up into smaller pieces. It's everything is a little bit more edible, I guess. It's easier to take, manageable, yeah. But that concept of sanctuary trauma it's intense. I had never actually thought about it, that you would add trauma, until he started talking about it a little while ago. And that's the quintessential, or the stereotypical veteran in TV and movies and stuff like that, is the tweaked out guy who can't handle a job, and or the homeless veteran who's just crazy as shit, right? And unfortunately, there is a portion of veterans that are like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the majority by any means, right? Most of us are, even dealing with our issues, we still put the brave face on, and we just like, okay, we're good to go. Let's deal with today. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, was the face, and how prolific it is. It's a very challenging thing to take off, first off, and then to leave off. It's a very difficult thing. But I believe you call it the mask.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Yeah. So could you describe it to people that wouldn't understand what I'm talking about?
Well, the mask is simply just a way of, it's a coping mechanism, is what it is. You put it on, you get up in the morning, and you put your mask on, and you go to work, or you go to whatever it is that that your day involves. So it essentially doesn't allow anyone to see the chinks in your armor. You're a solid dude. If you're a female vet, same thing. Like, you're solid. You're ready to rock, and nobody knows what's going on behind the mask. And I think it's pretty common. It's not just something that happens with military. All the first responders go through it too. And I think a lot of people just in civilian daily life that deal with traumatic events, they wear them too. So like I say, it's a coping skill. And what it does is it becomes exhausting.
Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to maintain a high level. People would ask me about it, especially my wife, when we were first dating, because we'd go out and I'd be happy and fine, and we'd be talking to people, and nothing, I wouldn't let anything bother me, and it'd be all good. And I'd get home and I would just fall apart, and I would be exhausted, and I'd be angry, and anything people said to me was like a tipping point. I was ready to freaking snap. But I'd pick up the phone and be like, hey, everybody, how's it going? Like, it immediately change again. And you're using so much effort to keep this up. And I was thinking about why we actually do it. And I realized that it's part of the training, right? Like, as we go through, you're taught not to allow your emotions to get in the way continually. And it, like you said, it becomes a coping mechanism to everything else. But it is when you're training, it is required, right? You have to have it. When you're talking about, especially infantry, engineers, combat arms guys, when you guys are storming a trench, you can't think about, I got a rock in my boot, it kind of hurts. It doesn't matter, right? You have to clear that fucking trench a lot more than that rock in your boot hurts. And we start to do it for mental stuff too, right? You're tired, you're exhausted, you're wet, you're pissed off, you don't want to do the work, and the sergeant says, ruck up. You're like, roger that. And you just get up and go. But you're still tired and exhausted and pissed off and other stuff, so you put the face on and you just fucking march.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to do that stuff or else you fail, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, in civilian life, it doesn't work very well. Like, you
Most
can't
things
use
that
it
we do in
24
the
times.
military don't translate well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true. Now, I've put a lot of thought into this, and one of the things that I like to do is give kind of both sides to it. Now, there is a benefit to using it, right? Like you can put the mask on and get shit done, which is beneficial, and it's also part of your recovery, because if you're thinking about how fucked up you are all the time, then you're not going to get better. You're just going to think about how fucked up you are all the time. You're going to beat the living crap out of yourself. And I actually just put out another addendum podcast, another podcast that I'm doing, where I talked about, all the hard times and self-talk being so important. How if you rip yourself apart like you're your own drill instructor, you're never going to get out of that hole, right? And so there's a part of it where you have to put the mask on just to get stuff done, so that you can say you have stuff done. Like you can feel better about yourself, and then you can tell yourself, "Yep, I'm capable. I'm still able to do stuff," and keeping yourself motivated. They always said, "Fake it till you make it," right? Like that's
Yeah.
the. But the problem is, the opposite side of it is, as you said, it's exhausting, right? You're using. I use the term neurological capital or psychological capital a lot, because I find a lot of people have it. It's easy to figure out monetary means when you're talking about this stuff, because you only have so much, and if you're using all of it just keeping a face up, you have nothing else for anything, right? You want to deal with your kids? Nope. You want to deal with your car? Nope.
The reality is you keep your hand on the throttle the whole time, twisting as you ride, and sooner or later the tank's going to run out of fuel, right? You've got to stop and fill up again. So yeah, it's definitely a real thing, and I can attest to that. Just on the rolling barrage is a perfect example. I just handed off the merchandise section to one of the volunteers with the organization. He's a fantastic guy, artillery. He's a solid dude, and we opened up registration, and he was like, "Holy shit, Scott! How did you do all of this and everything else?" And I'm like, "I have no idea how I did all of it, because essentially that's where I was at. I did merchandise, I did the registration, I did accommodations, like the whole 9 yards. It was a pretty big endeavor, and then actually get on the ride, and then have to have a brave face on every day for all the questions that come from everybody, and guiding them across the country, and directions. And it's not just a simple, we're driving from Calgary to Edmonton. We're driving from literally coast to coast, and through towns that I'd never even heard of before, other than when I did the basic research on, okay, we need to go down this road and go down that road, and the whole time you're having to be the leader, right? And so at the end of the day, I'd park the bike and go into the hotel, and just holy cow.
Yeah.
Like, there was at one point we were at West Hawk Lake, just before the Manitoba border, coming out of Ontario. And we just pulled in. It's 40 degrees out. It's smoking hot in August. And I roll up to the fuel pumps, and my wife, Leslie, she rides up right beside me, and we're going to fuel up. And literally this guy comes walking over, and he's like, stuffs this paper right in my face. And I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing?" He's like, here's my registration. I'm like, why? And Leslie says, he hasn't even got off his motorcycle yet. Like, we get your enthusiasm, but man, it's like, that stuff is taxing, and I love them to death. Every rider out there is awesome. Like, but they don't realize how exhausting it is to make that trip, right, and to hold it all together for everybody. So anyway, it's just those little lessons.
I have the same thing with the walk, right? You're working every day for months at a time, just getting everything organized and working the people, and I got to get here, and we have to have this set up, and there's these guys, and there's problems, and there's shit that comes out. Anytime you're organizing an event like that, right? Like, it's nowhere near the level of the barrage, because you're not only organizing it, but you're in it, right? You have to do it day to day to day over many days, which is exhausting in and of itself. But yeah, there's always the crash too, right? Like at the end of it all, you just spent so much of your not just your uh, psychological capital, but your physical capital. Like it's taxing on the body, sitting on a bike for days, and then yeah, you finish and you're just fucking done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because there's all the organization on both ends. There's organizing in the middle, and then of course you're taking part, and you can't stop. I mean, you've got to go each day. It's like you wake up after you hit a huge pothole the day before. The next day you wake up and you put the mask on because you're in agony, and you saddle up again and away you go because you got 3 or 4 more days of riding and a couple hundred people waiting. Like you have to go, right? So anyhow, you roll into Vancouver on the last day, and you do the finale event, and you're up all night. Of course, it's a big party at the end because you've accomplished this ride, and the next day you've got to get up, and you got to go dip your tires in the Pacific Ocean, right? So
post X.
Yep. And then and get this, so you've done all that, and the ride's over, but now you got to get home. So it doesn't end, and then it's
then you got the raffle, and you got all the other style, like the actual post-X drills and cleaning everything up and mailing shit out, and there's it's
all the thank you cards to everybody that's helped and donated and all that stuff, and it's a necessary part of the job, and I love doing it. I mean, it was great, and so on that note, I've actually stepped down as the lead for the ride. You're the first one that's actually hearing this publicly now. Both that and my resignation from Military Mines. It's just time for me to move on. They need some new blood in there, and I'm tired. I've been the president at Military Mines for 7 years, so and 5 years this summer will be with the Rolling Barrage. So for a ride that was supposed to last 1 year, it's going to see its 5th annual next August. So it's been it's been a fun ride.
Well, it goes to show there's a lot of humility there, right? Being able to say that when you're part of creating something, and then being able to just say, okay, you know what, you guys take it, man. Like I'm tired, I'm done. But it's kind of like your baby, right? Like you want to be part of it. You still want to be dealing with it, but it's that's one of the really difficult parts about especially the mask or the face, is that you become used to it. You become it's easier to have the face on and not deal with anything.
Yeah.
Not deal with any of the emotions or the pain or the difficulty, and just keep working. And I see that with a lot of guys too. They get out and they start working, and they bleed themselves dry, basically, right? And they work themselves to death to the point that they haven't dealt with any of their issues, and then are when they actually do need help, they're so far onto the so far off to the scale, like they're fucked up, and they need like intervention kind of thing, rather than if they had dealt with it 10 years ago or 5 years ago, like just start, right? And I had a buddy of mine I was talking to about the same thing, and as hard as you're working, keeping that face up, you're draining yourself, you're killing yourself to make yourself look like you're fine. And I was just like, the first thing is just go talk to somebody, right? Like at the very minimum, he was saying that he was worried that he might snap one day and just like go off the handle. And I'm like, okay, well, go talk to somebody about it. It's that simple. Don't talk to the base docs, right? Those guys are interested in keeping you in the military. That's what they're doing. And they're military guys. So you're going to walk in there in uniform and be like, I'm perfectly fine. I don't even know why I came in here. See you later. Like, you're not going to look for help, right? And I was like, go outside, see somebody outside, and just start talking. Because for me, when right before I got my diagnosis, when I was still in, I was having like sleep issues, like massive sleep issues. I was 2-3 hours a night, maybe I was actually getting, and it was broken up throughout the whole. Anyway, when I talked to my wife about it, she was like, well, maybe you should just go talk to somebody. Maybe it's a sleep issue. Like maybe you have sleep apnea, or you're you're, it could be physically something. And I was like, oh, well, that's a good point. Maybe I should just go talk to a doctor and see if I can get some tests done. But it was just that moment of going, okay, let's go see a professional and see what happens, because it can't hurt any worse than not sleeping. Like I'm already fucked up, so let's go find out. But there is such a usefulness in faking it, right? There's such a usefulness in that face, in that mask, that you can still go out, you can still do stuff, you can still enjoy life, I say with air quotes, but you're not really enjoying anything, right? You're getting through it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
do you have any tools that you found that to get past the usefulness of it, to get over the fact that it's viable, the technique, for at least a little while?
Well, I mean, I've learned how to develop some skills to keep me grounded. Even though it looks like I'm wearing the mask, I still, I can still peek behind it myself. I peel a piece off and have a look behind there and go, okay, you're doing okay, or hey, you need to do this. And the stuff that I do is like photography is one of them. I find that it's much the same as a shooting skill, because you actually have to concentrate. You have to focus on the image that you want. You have to, align yourself the right way. It takes time and patience for the right shot. And so, I mean, I use photography as one of them. And the biggest one that I've been using since, well, even before I was in the military, is writing. Obviously when I authored Ghost Keepers, that was a huge release for me. It was a major venting of everything that I had to put out there. And that helped. It didn't just help me, but it helped a lot of the guys that were on the tour. I've received, literally hundreds of emails from the guys I served with that, thanks for writing this. It helped my family understand what the hell's going on with me and why I am the way I am. And, so there's that. I've written for Pro Trucker magazine for about 14 years now. Every month there's a monthly column in there by me. It's called Idle Time. And it just talks about the trucking industry, and it lets me vent some frustrations out that way. And it also allows me to keep the trucking industry in a positive light as well. There's a lot of negative stuff that's out there, and I mean, you can find that anywhere. Yeah. But to actually focus on the positive things that are in the trucking industry, especially in light of some of the major accidents that have happened and have been broadcast. Of course, the tragedy in Humboldt. There's been a lot of negative focus on the trucking industry, but there are literally thousands and thousands of Canadian truck drivers out there that are professionals, and they do a great job. And something that a lot of people don't realize is lots of them are vets. Lots of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, they go out, they're job oriented, they're mission oriented. So they get from point A to point B, and they're safe, and they know all about risk management. And, so it's that's a whole other side of it. But writing is one of those coping skills that I use to vent, to allow that part of me that's behind the mask quite often to be able to come out and do, like a check on how things are.
Mm-hmm. Writing is so therapeutic. I know lots of people that do like morning journals, and it really, it comes down to just getting it out, right? Like you can bat stuff around your head all you want, and then, but to just either speak it, or like with the podcast for me, this is perfect because I get to talk about experiences. I get to reinforce all the tools that I need to use in order to handle my own shit every time I have an episode. Right? So I get to learn new stuff. So I 100% agree with you. Just getting it out is so key. And even if that is through writing, photography, I know so many guys who've gotten into photography since they've been out, and you're absolutely right. It is a shooting discipline because you have to have the right light and the right framing and the right color scheme in your actual photo. I don't know how to shoot photos. I'm not much of a photographer.
Well,
but
just think of the rules of the principles of aim. The rules of aim. Looking through the center of the rear aperture at the target, select point of aim. I mean, that's a key right there. You look through the aperture on a camera exactly the same way. So I mean, there's it's a very cathartic way of doing things.
Yeah, I agree. And it's usually a pretty solitary thing too, which is nice because
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of us, that's how we can get that mask off, how we get the face off, right? Like if you're by yourself, you don't need to put anything up. You don't need to have it on. You can just be with your own thoughts, your own emotions, and just take photos, right? That's one of the reasons why I love hunting so much, is the fact that I'm usually by myself, and I'm in the middle of friggin' nowhere, and I'm just climbing up mountains. And you know for a fact that there may be people around you, but really there's no one for hundreds of kilometers. Especially where I go hunting, I'm out in the middle of fucking nowhere. But the finding the right thing, right? That getting to get past that face. And one of the things my wife used to ask me was, whenever we'd go to my parents' house, I'd be fine. It didn't matter how bad of a mood I was in before we got there. The moment I stepped into my mom's house, I was just, everything's, oh yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah, cool. Let's talk about this. Blah, blah. That it would go on and I wouldn't even realize that I had put it on.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a very long time to be able to actually recognize that it was on. And then took me another long time to realize how to actually take it off once it's already on, without like an exhaustion kind of moment where you're like, fuck, I can't keep this up.
Yeah.
And it really took the removal of ego to dive into that, because I think a lot of it is centered in ego, right? You want to be useful. You want to be able to be relied upon, right? Like that's at the heart of what it is. What makes a good troop, right? Is that you can depend on them for anything. And it wasn't until I made that connection where it was an ego thing, where it was a connection to my own want to be useful, to actually recognize that it was on. Did you have any moments, anything that really like keyed where you were like, man, okay, I need to stop putting this on. I need to.
I've had those moments, and I've had moments also where it's like, okay, you need to stop doing this. My ex and I, we had a conversation, and she said to me, you need to stop. The war's over. You don't have to worry about it. There's not, impending danger at every turn, and you need to just stop this. And I went to bed that night, and I said, okay, I'm not going to worry about it. There's nothing wrong with the world. It's all roses, and everything's going to be great. And I laid down, and I fell asleep. Took me my usual couple hours, but I finally wound down. And 1:00 in the morning, bing, the eyes come open because something's not right. I know something's not right. And I just laid there, and it was hard. I had to fight through this, that there was nothing happening. What was going on was just me laying there freaking out, like I have to go outside and deal with what's happening. And so I'm laying there and I'm going, no, there's nothing happening. And this is all in your head. There's nothing going on. So I laid there awake for the rest of the night because it was 1 a.m. By the time I got myself half settled down again, it was 3:30, 4:00. And then I usually get up by 5 anyhow. Mm-hmm. So I got up, I walked outside, and my entire neighborhood had been ransacked by teenagers.
Oh my God.
They destroyed everything. Like there was toolboxes that were yanked out of people's trucks, and the guy's water fountain next door was smashed out on the street. And I mean, there was just shit everywhere. And somebody said to me, why didn't you do something? And I was like, so from that point on, I was like, well, I guess, that isn't going to work for me anymore. The whole not wearing the mask thing.
Yeah.
So I had to, just put it on again. And like I say, now I use my little checks with photography and writing to make sure that I'm still, still all together. And I think one of the things that's important to recognize with the wearing of the mask is when you're looking behind it, and you're going to do something like writing or photography or whatever it is you're going to do, painting, you're actually, and I know some guys will just roll their eyes at this, but this is the reality, is you have to get in touch with who you are inside. And, as horrifying as that can be, you've got to be able to look inside yourself and say, hey, you know what? I made a shit ton of mistakes, or I did a lot of this, or I did a lot of that, or, I could have been better here, or I could have, saved that, or whatever. But at the end of that, you've still got to be able to love yourself. You got to figure out where your feelings are at with yourself. And I know it sounds crazy, but it's a genuine part of healing, and you have to find that, because my saying is nobody beats me up like I do.
Mhm.
Right. So
every unit has that saying, right? You never hear, oh, those guys cock their guys more than we do, right? It's always nobody fucks an engineer like an engineer. Nobody screws the VPs over like the VPs. And then we do it to ourselves. We literally light ourselves up about the stupidest stuff. And we will deride every good thing that we have done in life because we didn't get the laundry done that day, or because, and the other part of it is recognition of patterns too, right? Like, where are you going to places, or are you hanging around people that are going to be the continuation of what you're still doing, right? And for me, martial arts has been part of my life most of my life, but that was a big one because it's physical, but it takes mental acuity. You have to study, you have to work hard. It eliminates your ego. I've been getting into jiu-jitsu in the last little while, and it getting choked out by like a 17-year-old 100-pound girl. that'll test your ego real fast.
Yep.
A really big part of, as you said, getting better is being able to understand yourself and then actually enjoy being around yourself. Because it's so hard for a lot of us, right? We can sit there on the couch and you can watch a favorite TV show and you will sit in your head and you'll fucking beat yourself. You should be doing something. Why aren't you fucking off? Get off the couch, you lazy fuck, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Doesn't matter what you have done earlier in the day, right? Like, you could have built an entire deck by yourself. As soon as the moment you hit the couch, you're a lazy fuck. And then, so keying into those patterns is a big part too, right? Being able to understand where you hit yourself right away. For me, the couch was a big one, right? The moment I sat down on the couch, even though I got a fucked up back, my knees are messed up, my shoulders are toast. When the especially in Alberta, when the pressure changes, I'm a human barometer, right? My knees just swell up, my back is killing me, my shoulder, and my hearing goes all messed up because of the nerve damage I have. Anyway, it is something that I have to be very aware of. So the moment the temperature changes, or I start to get that pain and I want to sit down and I want to relax, I have to allow myself that. I have to be gracious with my own body and say, okay, you know what? Everything hurts. Take a minute, right?
Yeah.
And I put that into working with my wife and working with my kids. And, when I need time, when I'm starting to get really agitated, I have to actually say that. Okay, you know what? I need a minute. Even if I go and play video games for 5 minutes just to calm down, you know what? You use it, because you're better 5 minutes from now after calming down for playing video games than you would be trying to fight through that particular issue, right?
Yeah.
And that's what that face, at least for me, it made me want to fight through issues, which made me worse because now I'm upset, I'm angry, and I'm...
Well, it's being mission oriented is a curse.
Yeah.
In civilian life, or in dealing with your feelings, dealing with traumas that you've been engaged in. It's tough because you think that by charging through this stuff, you're gonna fix it, you're gonna make it better, and in reality, the harder you charge into it, the worse it gets. So it's finding that balance to that really is going to help you get through it. So you have to be able to pick that moment to just take a breath and take each piece bit by bit.
Yeah. Do you find anything in particular that helps you get over yourself, for lack of a better term, right? Like, because there's your own, you have to be able to get over whatever you think you are, right? Because I was a combat engineer, I blew stuff up, I was hardcore, I was bad, blah 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 blah, right? I'm not anymore. I was, but I'm not. Now I'm a dad, and I'm a podcaster, and I'm a veterans advocate, and whatever, right? And you have to be able to take what you thought you or what you were, and you have to be able to move it aside and go, what am I now?
Being humble is not something that is trained into us. I mean, to be in the combat arms in particular, they don't have, your personality type is generally an A-type personality. You're cocky. You're expected to be full of piss and vinegar. That's how you get the job done, is thinking that you're better than everybody else. Especially the enemy.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's no, I don't want to say brainwashed, but you're trained into that thought process. That's the way you have to be. And you do it amongst your buddies, and it's just the way it is. So when you come out and and you need to try to not be that person, it's a huge struggle. And sometimes it takes a defining moment to become humble. And sometimes it's something that you take the time to retrain yourself to be humble.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do that as well. I think anybody that says they haven't had to do that is full of shit. Personally, I mean, if you've come out of the combat arms trades, to me, it's something you have to work at, is toning yourself down, because you've had to elevate yourself to get the job done.
Yeah.
Because nobody else is going to do it. They're not going to elevate you. They're going to kick you down. So they're up. So that's just the way that goes.
Yeah, I used to. There's a story I love telling, and it's. I remember it was from Basic, and we were doing push-ups for something. I don't know what we were doing push-ups for. We did a lot of push-ups, right? I'm sure you did too. And one of the instructors was going around going like, "What do you want to be? What do you want to be?" And like asking for trades and stuff. And he came by me and he's like, "What do you want to be?" And I was like, "I am going to be a combat engineer, Master Corporal." And he was like, "Oh, you think so, do you?" And I'm like, "No, I know so." And you're right. It's that attitude, right? You need that. Mm-hmm. That's the type of person you want in those jobs, because that's, like you said, how the job gets done.
Yeah.
And I totally lost my train of thought what I was talking about.
Humility.
We're
talking about humility.
Oh, right. So yeah. That's what we need to teach in the forces, because a lot of the toxicity that we see is specifically that issue, is the people not being humble. And I don't know how many times you come up with an idea, you're like, "Oh, you know what we should do? We should do this particular style of training," and people would tell you, "Okay, keep that close to your chest. Don't tell anybody about it." So you're like, write the memo, get it up, because if you start talking about it, someone's gonna take the idea and they're gonna run with it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, everyone believes them. They're like, "Okay, cool, yeah, no, I need credit for this, so absolutely I should keep it close to my chest and not talk about it." Who's benefiting from that, right? No one. Yeah. And I'm a big fan of Jocko Willink and his book Extreme Ownership and all the stuff he talks about in leadership. And one of the key things he continuously harps is humility, because it's all about the team. It's not about you, right? But it is so hard to teach yourself that once you're out, right? Because again, you have to get over yourself, right?
Well, I was just going to say, in agreement with humility needs to be trained. I had said a few years back in Ottawa, when I was there speaking with cabinet about suicide and so on with vets, that there needs to be a fundamental change in the way we deal with mental health in the forces. And it's something, we learn how to strip and assemble a rifle in every trade, doesn't matter where you are. You learn how to strip and assemble that rifle in the dark and put it back to, make it clean and fancy and all the good stuff. And you go over that and over that and over that and over that, so it's ingrained in your muscle memory. And we need to do the same sort of stuff with how we deal with people. And to me, that would make a huge difference in how guys come out and gals come out of the forces post, service in theater.
Yeah.
Whether it's whether they were in Afghanistan or a peacekeeping mission or whatever, aid to civil power. The traumas that they received during that time would be much less if they already knew what to expect and had the tools already in their toolbox, prior to, because it was part of the training. They do shape training and all this other stuff that goes on now that I'm not even privy to most of it, but there's no reason they couldn't do something like that right from basic training.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking, like, you're always going to have people that are going to be naysayers and old school, and they're going to go, you don't need that crap. And I'm teaching you this because I have to.
Yeah.
You're always going to have those people, But the reality is even if that cranky old fart puts that stuff across like that, somebody's still going to take it.
Yep.
And they're going to employ it.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter, even if it's poor training, they're still going to get something out of it. So I think it's something that would be beneficial, and whether or not they'll institute something like that in the future remains to be seen.
Yeah.
But
we'll see what happens there. I mean, we're probably looking at another downturn for the military in the next little while. We'll see politically wise. That's a whole other side of the shit show that's going on right now. But, one of the things, the reason I called this the podcast Tools for the Toolbox is, I mean, how many times did we hear that during training, right? I don't know how many classes I sat through where they're like, you'll probably never use this, but it's another tool for the toolbox. You might use it eventually. Mm-hmm. Just keep it in your head. And it never really keyed for me until I was an instructor. And somebody asked me, one of the recruits asked me, he's like, why are we learning this? This isn't part of our job. This doesn't make any sense. And I said, okay, well, let me give you an example. When I was in high school, we learned algebra. Every single one of us sat there going, the hell are we ever going to use algebra for? Right? Why are we learning Pythagorean's theorem? This makes no sense in your average everyday life unless you deal with math directly. Why are we learning it? And then fast forward to my 5s course, and we had to sit for a DL portion, which was basic algebra and finding the area of a cone and finding how to find the volume of a cylinder, and because it's part of the engineering training, right? If we need to drill holes and then fill it with C4, we need to know how much C4 to go in there. We can't just start filling it ahead of time with you need to know how much to order so you can get it here. Anyway.
Hey, you can never have too much C4.
No, absolutely. I agree 100%. Every problem in the human history can be solved with the correct application of high explosives, period. But the problem was a lot of the guys that I was doing the 5 course with, they had no idea how to do algebra. They had no idea what the formulas were, how to employ them, how to do that stuff. And I remember actually the sergeant who was in charge of us was like, I'm going to have to look this up. And I was like, Sarge, I got this. And I walked up to the board and I put all of the different formulas down and I was like, boom, 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 boom. Here's how you do it. Here's how it's laid out. And I basically taught a class on algebra. Basic algebra. Like, I'm not saying I'm a mathematician by any means, and it hit me. I was just like, oh my God, I'm using my high school algebra. I'm actually using it right now, and I'm dealing with explosives. And I told this to the recruits, and they were like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, you never know, right? Like, this is good information to have in your head. And if it all of a sudden comes up and you're that guy who's like, I know algebra, I can teach, then you're a step ahead because you have that knowledge in the back of your head. And I think as we were saying, humility training, it would be one of those things. It just to touch on it a little bit more. I mean, they always say it. It's part of your, you're part of your leadership training, and it's always about the men before, the men first, then your men, your weapon, your the mission, weapon, men, you, something like that. Leadership, I can't remember. It's been a while now. Yeah. But you're always last. And the thing that I tell people now is now that you're out, you're first. You are the mission now. You can't let the job be your mission. You can't let somebody else be your mission. It's about you. You have to be not quite selfish, but you have to actually know yourself, as you said earlier, right? You have to be able to say, okay, this is what I need today. If you need to just lay in bed in the dark all day, do it, right? If that's going to help you,
that's what you
do it.
Yep.
Don't do it for 6 days in a row, but
balance,
exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Any tips for anybody finding that balance that you've come up with in your time?
Well, as I said right at the onset of this, it's individual. Nobody's the same. Nobody reacts the same. Nobody's picked up the same traumas. You could be in the same battle at the same time and both get wounded, and you'll have 2 different outcomes mentally.
Mm-hmm.
So the tips is just find out what works for you. And you might have to, it's like finding a counselor to talk to. You might go through a dozen of them till you find the right one that clicks.
Mm-hmm.
But keep searching for that. Don't give up. because it is out there. You just have to find it. And once you've got a few different tools, then you find the balance in what works, because tools aren't just the the environmentally friendly hugs and kisses stuff. Sometimes it is going to the range and blowing shit up. That is a tool. So you have to put that in perspective with the hugs and kisses, and find that balance, and whatever works for that person is where it's gonna play out for them.
That's such a great formulation, because it's so true. Everybody has their own little quirks, right? What is it that you like? What is it that you want to do? And the other thing is, when I was younger, I was told, do a job you love for whatever. I don't remember what the quote is, right? If you do what you love, you'll never have to work a day in your life. And I was like, that is bullshit, because even if you love doing it, there's going to be days where you wake up and go, fuck,
what the hell am I doing?
Exactly, right? And it doesn't matter how good that job is. There's always days that you have to grind through it. It's going to be work. And you have to understand that because it's work, you're going to have to do the grind. And, finding a therapist is so hard to do, to actually find one that clicks and you can work with and that understands you and will challenge you in the right way. That's key.
Something else I would point out for guys and gals that are going to get out or thinking of transitioning to the civilian side of life is to make sure that anytime you have something go on physically or mentally, go to the MIR and have it documented. Get it in your file. That is a must.
Yeah.
I've got injuries that I can't claim because I was too tough to go in.
Yep.
I'm not going to the MIR, and you struggle through it. So, but I do have other ones, where I had 9 claims with VAC, and one of them went through without issue. The other 8 I had to appeal right to the VRAB, and the VRAB, the panel that sat there, the three individuals who looked at my files, they were like, why are you even here?
Yeah.
Like, it's obvious that this is, that you should be granted all of these claims. Why are you here at the VRAB? I said, that's a really good question, because as you can see in my file, everything that I've claimed is in my medical file. It's in my PERS file. So because I had that documentation, though, is why they were successful. So it's important that the troops, heed that part of, our conversation, is make sure you document everything, whether it's, going to the dentist. And here's an example. I was in Petawawa during battle school. I was in my 2nd month and I went to the dentist, and the dental tech there, she unknowingly pushed some plaque up underneath my gum.
Okay.
Under the gum line. Well, it was instantly infected. I got back to the course lines, and I'm in my station job that evening, and the next thing I know, I was like on my face.
Yep.
And the guys, I'm being woken up, and it's like, what the hell's wrong? And I didn't realize it, but my face had been swelling and swelling.
Yeah.
Like it was, toxic.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I ended up in the base hospital, like, immediately, and they had to drain my gum, and all of this, it's disgusting fluid was drained, and I was on antibiotics. And that the next morning, the doc says, well, you're probably going to be here for a week. And I said, well, if it's all the same to you, Captain, I'd actually like to get back to my course lines, or I'm going to get recoursed. And he says, well, I can't really release you. And I said, are you going to charge me with disobeying a lawful command if I pack my shit and go back to the course? And he says, you really want to go back? Eh? I says, I have to go back. I'm not getting recoursed. Yeah. And so anyway, that wasn't documented. For whatever reason, it wasn't documented, and I had no idea. So now I actually have dental issues. You can see one of my teeth is all buggered up, and it's right where that incident happened. So, do your best to make sure that all your stuff is documented. It will pay off in the long run.
Yeah. When I was an instructor, I hammered that all the time, because the only reason that I have the the benefits that I do right now is because I was one of those guys where it was like, I'm going to get this written up. There was lots of times where I was like, yeah, fuck it. I'm just going to pound through. And unfortunately, so I don't have the level that I should be having because of the amount of injuries that I do, or that I sustained over the years, especially my knees. Like, I don't know how many times I strained or dislocated or I had some pretty messed up knees. But anyway, there were lots of times we'd be on a run and be like, yeah, my knee hurts. It hurts, but I'm just going to keep running. All right, you keep running. You get back to the unit. You're like, yeah, that hurts. Fuck it. I'll just get my boots on and I'll be fine. And it's those points where you're like, if it hurts that much, like if you're still thinking about it through the run, after the run, all day, and the next day, you probably should have gone to the MIR. And all you have to do is go there, right? You don't need a category. You don't need a chit. You just need to show up and be like, hey, my knee hurts. Can you look at it? They'll look at it and be like, yeah, it's a minor strain, minor whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's on paper. And then you have it.
Exactly.
You don't need a CF98 all the time. You don't need an incident report all the time, but you just need to actually have it on paper. And it's so important. But again, that's that ego, right? Of just, fuck it, I'm fucking good. Yep. I'm good to go. No worries. You're good.
Yeah, I'm hardcore.
Hardcore, yeah. Everyone thinks they're hard up until they can't anymore.
Yeah. You're hardcore and stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
That's that humility, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So,
well, I appreciate this, man. We've been going for a little bit over an hour now, and I can't thank you enough. This has been a fantastic conversation. Do you have any final points? Anything you want to add last minute before we shut her down?
Nope. If I could add anything, yeah, sure. What the hell? I'd like to say thanks to all the troops for everything they've done. Since before my service and after. It's all of us, that have served in uniform that keep the country running.
Absolutely.
Protected. So thanks to all the troops. Thanks.
Solid. If anybody would like to find more about you or follow you in any way, do you have social media or nothing like that? What about your you got your book still floating around though, right?
Yeah, the book's still out there. Yeah, absolutely. Ghost Keepers. It's on Amazon and whatnot. So
wicked.
Yeah.
All right, cool, man. Yeah. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. That's gonna be an awesome. Well, once I edit it all together, it's gonna be awesome.
I hope so.
Yeah.
No, you did a great job. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh man, my pleasure. Absolutely. This is, like I said, I'm learning stuff every time. That concludes this episode of The Toolbox. I want to thank you for listening. I hope you were able to use some of the information that was offered. I want to thank all those putting it on the line for us every day. Military, veterans, first responders, and public servants. Keep up the good work. I look forward to bringing you more tools for your toolbox. And until next time, stay open, stay humble, and stay focused. Chimo.